In today's Farm Report, farm broadcasters from across the country met in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago, and one of the speakers at the meeting was FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai, and he talked about how AM radio has helped farmers and broadcasters and what the future looks like. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
Radio began on the AM band, and some of the very first programming on the radio was directed to farmers and ranchers. That was part of what FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai spoke about when addressing farm broadcasters meeting in Kansas City last week.
From the earliest days of commercial broadcasting, farmers and radio have been peas in a pod. Back in the early 1920s, for instance, radio broadcasters took to the airwaves to relay weather and market reports to farmers and to grain dealers. One example was KDKA in Pittsburgh, a station that I had the privilege of visiting just a couple of years ago. On May 19th, 1921, KDKA broadcast the first agricultural market reports over radio, around 6 months before it aired the nation's first commercial broadcast.
Commissioner Pai's main topic was actions taken recently to help revitalize AM radio.
In an order adopted unanimously by the FCC this past month, we finally delivered some relief to struggling AM broadcasters. First, we reformed many of our technical rules pertaining to the AM band, and these changes will make a real difference to AM broadcasters. We got rid of things such as the AM ratchet rule, which will make it easier for broadcasters to improve their facilities. We modified our daytime and nighttime community coverage standards, along with minimum efficiency standards, all of which will give broadcasters flexibility when it comes to site location. And the use of modulation-dependent carrier level to control technologies will hopefully allow them to cut down on their operating costs.
And Pai noted that the FCC is also involved in working to bring more internet access to rural areas.
Now, I'm a big fan of broadcasting, and I think that it is and will continue to be critical to rural America. But broadband is also increasingly important. This internet-connected world is also true for rural Americans. And one example is precision agriculture, which is bringing big data into the field. Unmanned aerial vehicles, variable rate application seeding, and in-cab computing solutions are changing the way that farmers do business. Companies that are building to places like that need the FCC to be a 21st century ally, as opposed to a 20th century hindrance. And one way that we can do this is by modernizing some of the outdated rules that stand in the way of rural broadband providers offering standalone broadband service, the kind that many Americans in the urban areas simply take for granted.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
The big storm system moving across the nation this week has had as its sidekick severe weather outbreaks in parts of the country. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says, for instance, tornadic activity in the southern plains, rare for this time of year, that struck
primarily from western Kansas southward into the northern panhandle of Texas on November 16th, and early reports indicated that there were more than 36 tornadoes with this outbreak, which is quite high in this part of the country for this time of year.
And more rare, a tornado sighting in the Golden State.
We did see a rare EF1 tornado in central California, Stanislaus County, on November 15th.
Rippey says tornadic activity is more common this time of year in the southeast. But instead of severe weather outbreaks, the forecast for this week calls for significant rains in the region. And that will continue to hamper cotton growers and other farmers trying to finish harvest of their seasonal crops. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Nearly 100 biodiesel leaders from across the country were on Capitol Hill recently to talk with lawmakers about their industry. Cindy Zimmerman from AgriPulse has more.
Nearly 100 biodiesel leaders from across the country were on Capitol Hill this week to talk with lawmakers about reinstating the biodiesel tax incentive this year. Greg Anderson is a soybean farmer from Nebraska who serves on the National Biodiesel Board.
Well, currently we're working toward getting it reinstated. Congress has actually dropped the ball 4 out of the last 6 years, allowing it to expire. The last time December of 2014. So we've marched through 2015 without the tax incentive. We're very confident that it will be reinstated. We'd like to see it, and the talk is perhaps maybe even for 2 years, retroactive for 2015 and then extended to 2016. It's very important to put that in because it levels the playing field. We know that oil is subsidized, and biodiesel is a very young industry, so to speak, when compared to oil. It's been around for 100 years. And so we see that it gives incentive and maybe confidence to especially the plants who are out there, have the production capacity, want to make new hires, provide great jobs, and also energy independence, and we're kind of lacking when it's not in place. So we're working hard, and we look forward to that being put in and signed here before the end of the year.
Meanwhile, Anderson says biodiesel producers are hopeful that the renewable fuel standard numbers due out from the Environmental Protection Agency at the end of this month will show some favorable changes to help grow the industry.
We've been working with EPA and showing them data and information that would bump those numbers up. They came out and said, we want to bump them up by about 100 million gallons per year and kind of grow it more slowly. Our stance is, while the numbers weren't terrible, they needed to be more robust and grow it faster. And so what we're proposing is at least $2 billion by 2016 and $2.3 billion by 2017. That will allow the industry to grow at a pace that's sustainable and continue to provide biodiesel wherever it's used. We're confident that we can make some headway there, and we've been in contact with EPA all through the process. They respect our industry. We provide them with credible data and information. That's what they crave to formulate those numbers. And you're right, those will be announced soon, and then from that we can move on and continue to grow the industry.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
As far as getting the rest of the winter wheat crop planted,
we've kind of come to an almost standstill in some areas.
Agriculture Department meteorologist Brad Bippy says as we start this week, farmers have planted 94% of the wheat crop. That's 4% less than the 5-year average for this time, but there are some places where planting has really bogged it down.
The big delays include North Carolina, just 45% planted, 5-year average 67%, and then we see 9-point delays compared to the 5-year average in Arkansas, where the planting is 81% complete, and in Texas, where planting is just 82% complete.
The condition of what's been planted and the 87% that's emerged, 52% rated in good to excellent condition, 10% poor to very poor. However,
those numbers have been slowly improving the last few weeks. Last week, for example, we were 51% good to excellent, 11% very poor to poor.
But there are 8 states with at least 10% of their wheat in poor to very poor shape. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.